everyone. Karen Roby, Veronica Combs here. We're talking about the first keynote address that Microsoft has been involved in 10 years as part of CES. Veronica, that's hard to believe.
Yeah, well, it's kind of been a trend over the last few years for the big companies to stay away, or at least the big tech companies to stay away. They have their own events, let the TV makers take over CES. So yeah, it was the first time they spoke. Brad Smith, the president, spoke today, and it was funny. He did not talk about any Microsoft products. There was no confusing long branded name about some fantastic new product that they're working on. What he did was talk about the state of cybersecurity and the state of ethics in AI. He had this long history lesson. It felt a little bit like a Rachel Maddow show, I have to tell you, because apparently Ronald Reagan back in the 80s watched War Games, the famous movie about Matthew Broderick hacking into the government's computer that controls thermonuclear weapons and almost brought the country to the brink of a nuclear war with Russia. So apparently Ronald Reagan watched that movie and then said to his advisors, could this really happen to us? And they said, well, we're working on artificial intelligence and maybe. So that piece of art of theater prompted Ronald Reagan to get his advisors to write the first national directive around cybersecurity back in the 80s. And I think we're still pretty worried about what AI can do. So it was a really interesting history lesson from Mr. Smith from Microsoft.
Yeah, most definitely. And 10 years, that is a long time. I guess now that I think about it, since the big companies have been involved on this level. And interesting that he wasn't touting their products or anything, but rather chose to talk about what is a serious issue, very serious for all of us. The tech needs to be used for good and not evil. And I think we were talking about this just a few minutes ago, that I find really super interesting, in that uh the character, and how Matthew Broderick got in through a weak password. Go figure. We're still dealing with this, right?
We're still dealing with this. I mean, I went back and read the Wikipedia, and this came out in 83. And yes, so one of the early researchers in AI, at least in the movie, I didn't confirm if this is real life, but used his son's name as the password to get into the computer. So, Joshua, there's no number, there's no special character. It's easy to guess. It's like your dog's name. Oh, my dog is my password to get into my computer. So not only did this movie from the 80s predict, the ongoing problem of weak passwords, it also highlighted the fact that artificial intelligence is getting away from us. And the president of Microsoft pointed out that, back in the 60s, even before Matthew Broderick and his hacker role, President Kennedy warned us that technology has no conscience. It's just a machine, it's just a device, it's just an algorithm, it just runs. Humans are the ones with ethics and morals and a conscience. And Mr. Smith said that we all need to bring that to work every day, and to think about not only all the cool things that AI can do, but all the bad things that AI could do. He said he felt that, like, the country was turning to tech leaders for guide rails, guardrails. What are the rules? How are we going to make sure AI doesn't, profile every Black person as a criminal or deny every woman a credit card application? He didn't have any specifics around what those guardrails should be, but he was pretty rattled by not only the SolarWinds attack, but also the fact that AI is getting away from us.
And that would be, the obvious next question is, what if there was any call to action, or just for us to really keep top of mind that we all are responsible for making sure tech is used for good. Is that kind of how he wrapped up what our responsibility is here?
He did point out, he went back to history again and pointed out that one driving factor, one huge risk factor for the United States with 9/11 was the fact that agencies were not sharing information, right? The FBI was doing this, the CIA was doing this. We didn't have Homeland Security back then, but, Border Patrol was doing something else entirely, I'm sure. And so he said that we still haven't learned that lesson. He said that the tech industry should move away from, sharing information on a need to know basis, and move more toward collaboration and having sharing data be the default, not the exception. And, he said, certainly we need to protect intellectual property, we need to protect privacy, but it was interesting to hear him call out the need to share data and not be so territorial and defensive. I'm not sure what that looks like. The healthcare industry has had made some progress in sharing data without compromising
Right.
competitive advantage, but I don't know. He was rattled, so it was nice to see a leader rattled like the rest of us are worried about all this stuff. And he said, we need to do more with sharing data, and he said with solar winds, the attack, it was so far away from the norm that
Mhm.
he didn't mention President Trump, but we've talked so much about President Trump breaking norms that he kind of felt like that same thing, right? Like there's no rules anymore. Everything's fair game,
Right, right.
attack hospitals, attack the Capitol, do whatever. So, hopefully Michael Schaaf will take the initiative and come up with some specifics and say, this is a code of conduct that we all need to agree to, and there need to be consequences for breaking it.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, we've got a lot of work to do. We do know that for sure. All right, Veronica. Well, hopefully we'll enjoy the rest of CES, what's left of it now. And it's definitely a different experience for all of us. And just hoping we're back in person in 2022. Fingers are crossed for that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. Thanks,
All right.
Karen.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. For much more on CES 2021, make sure you check out Tech Republic and ZDNet.